systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our round 2 showdown stream for the Rocket Mortgage Classic. Going to get you guys ready for all of your lineups on Friday with a look at the weather report, any of your questions and player deep dives that you've got for me in the live chat. We're also going to talk through some strategy, ownership heading into tomorrow's slate, and even some lineup construction towards the end to go ahead and tie it all together. So anything on top of that you're curious about, feel free to go ahead and pick my brain in the chat. So we got a few of the regulars down there already. We got Last One Standing, Go Collect, C. Floyd down there as well. And yeah, kind of becoming the pot guider whisperer at this point, but we'll see how he holds up over the next 54 holes. It's been a good start, of course, a few guys towards the top end of the leaderboard. If you guys checked out the prop and betting live stream, it was a really good start from that angle as well. So super stoked to see what the rest of the weekend has in store. So hopefully it's treating you guys just as nicely out there and are ready to talk some golf for Friday. So any specific questions, don't be shy at all. Throw those in the chat. Any player deep dives, we're going to go through a little bit later on. And other than that, I just need you to smash the like button for the crew over here at SHIPIT Nation, and also hit that subscribe button if you guys haven't already. And if you're here early to the live stream, I'm assuming you're already subscribed, but maybe you're somebody watching this on replay. We do this for every single round, and we do it live, as you guys can tell, with the live chat, and that's for rounds 2 through 4 every single week and for main slate on Wednesday. So you guys won't want to miss any of that. We got Nick down there, Steven as well. You're on a vacation. Sounds like a lot of fun. I enjoyed my vacation, of course, at the US Open. Let's get back after the grind. So first things first, let's look at the golf course today, which played a little bit easier in the afternoon, which I thought it'd play pretty flat today. And I did take some PM AM stacks, as we talked about on yesterday's live stream. So this is actually a good surprise, right? I did not think the PM was going to play easier today, but this, along with a potential weather edge towards the AM guys tomorrow, is looking juicy for some of those main slate stacks. So it wasn't a massive exposure for me or anything on those PM AM lineups, but I'm sure glad that I used a lot of my 6-7K players from that side of things, because not only did you have about a quarter stroke advantage today, but it could be over a half a stroke advantage tomorrow, because the wind gusts are going to be a lot more significant in the afternoon. So this is for Detroit Golf Club. I've got the HRRR up, and you can see sub 10 miles an hour of sustained winds in the morning. Afternoon, it's in that 12 to 16 mile an hour range. So it kicks up quite significantly with the sustained winds. And I think even more substantially, the wind gusts, HRRR actually doesn't have them too bad, but some of the local forecasts are calling for close to 30 mile an hour wind gusts tomorrow. So I do think it's going to be a little bit blustery. I don't think it's going to play easier in the afternoon. In fact, it would surprise me if the morning didn't play at least a half a stroke easier tomorrow. And I say at least a half a stroke easier because I think that's really the minimum with this kind of a weather forecast. It could even be like a stroke difference between the morning and the afternoon. So I'm not saying that you have to only play guys going off in the morning, but this is one of the few slates, and it's been a while since we've had something that looks like it could be a half a stroke to a full stroke advantage. But when we start getting into that half a stroke to 1 stroke territory is when I start only playing guys from that side of the tee times. If it's only going to be like a quarter of a stroke to half a stroke difference like we had for today, right? It's not only worth playing guys on one side of things, but when it starts to get a little bit more substantial is where you at the very least want to be siding and leaning your exposure towards the AM side of things. And there can be an argument to be made, even if you're a 150 maxer, but especially if you're only going with a single entry or just a few lineups for tomorrow, to only play guys that are going off in the morning, because not only are they going to have the better wind conditions, but you also have to remember that it's going to be a softer golf course, that, golf course is going to get firmer and faster as the week goes on, especially if they don't get any rain during play tomorrow. So those morning guys are going to have a better chance at sticking balls closer to the hole, on top of the winds getting stronger as the day goes on. So I'm personally going to be playing a lot of AM guys. I haven't completely set my player pool as of now, but I'm, at least as of this very second, planning on only playing guys from the morning wave, and that's as a 150 max player. And like I said, if you're a single entry, if you're only playing a couple lineups, you can make an even bigger argument for taking guys on that side. So that's my personal take on it. I'm going to be tracking this weather rather closely. Of course, if it looks a little bit flatter later tonight or even tomorrow morning before lock, then I might try and sneak in a few PM guys in there. But if it holds up with this sort of forecast, I would say the prudent move is, at least in 4 or 5 players in your lineup, taking guys from that side of things. And the next thing I want to go through would be ownership. So before we start talking about shots gain metrics from today, just want to give you guys an idea of where the ownership is shaking out. And I think the weather's a really good segue into this conversation, because as this community has become more and more educated, harder to beat, frankly, right, over the years, and people have started to get a lot better with their showdown process, you see more people incorporating the weather. So, this live stream, this kind of content has been preaching that for quite some time, but even other communities are starting to make it a more of a keystone in what they're doing. So what I've done, and I haven't finished my projections yet. Of course, I run my Patreon page. I have a whole set of projections that I've been working on this afternoon for my website. I've already started to kind of bump the AM guys with their ownership a bit to account for the fact that a lot of the masses are going to see that same kind of a weather edge. But I've already gotten through, started to kind of get an idea where the ownership's going to come in outside of a few specific players. And we're actually going to point out a few of the guys I think are going to get the steam right now. It's not that bad. So for example, up top, the AM guys are maybe like an extra 1.5–2% owned. Ben Griffin, though, I've got it close to 30% again. So like, there are going to be some ticking time bombs with the ownership, where I think a lot of the people that are using the same kind of process we have here are going to end up on the same plays. I think Ben Griffin would be one of those players. So he's really the guy I see getting all that kind of steam in the 10K range. 9K range, Max Grazerman looks like he could be getting quite a bit of steam too. He's only $9,200, and he had that nuclear round today. And he goes off in the AM wave. So I could see him being maybe the highest owned player in that range. Luke Clanton also probably going to get a lot of late steam as well, with how well he played on his back nine today. In the 8K range, a lot of steam is going to a Minwoo, obviously, after his -9 round. But don't be thrown off when you see Davis Thompson at really high ownership as well. And just like for full transparency, I love Thompson. He's down as a yes already in my player pool. He's going to be one of the shots gain metrics guys that we get to that looks really good with his ball striking stats. Also elite tier course history, nearly won here last year. And on top of that, he's an AM wave player. So those 3 players, 3 or 4 guys that we pointed out already, they're all on the right side of tee times. They all kind of fit the stat profile we're looking for. They're all fantastic plays on paper, but the ownership is going to be a little bit more inflated than what we're used to. So I just want to kind of set the table with that, give you guys that information ahead of time, so you're not thrown off when you see the AM guys a little bit higher owned than you might expect. And a few other examples of that would be a Ryan Gerard. He also had a good ball striking day, and he's on the AM side of things. I'm playing Ryan Gerard despite that, but just don't be surprised when he's going to be higher rounds than you would expect. A Ryo Hisatune is also going to be pretty chalky. Believe it or not, Chris Kirk is going to get some ownership. That's a wild thing to say with how he's been playing, but he's on the right side of things, and he's got elite tier course history, and he played well today. And then in the 6K range, the obvious piece of chalk is an Aldrich Potgieter, who I'm not going to be using because of that kind of ownership. And of the guys we've mentioned, there are a few that I'm going to be fading, of course, because ownership is something, game theory is a big part of the round 2 process. Potgieter will be one of those fades, but I've got him over 10% in the 6K range, because the ball striking looks pretty good. He's on the AM side of tee times, and of course, he's at the top end of the leaderboard. So can't give you guys exact numbers on the ownership, as I'm still trying to work it out myself. But all of those guys we just mentioned are going to be the chalk in their respective price ranges. So I would say the AM players are really easy to get to. I mean, that's where all of my exposure is really going to be. But you have to be careful in a few cases with the ownership that you're not playing the guys that everyone is landing on, right? Like, for example, when we go through the shots gain metrics and I show you the ball striking stats, you'll see why some of those guys are going to be chalk. Like, for example, an Aldrich Potgieter, he gained over 6 strokes ball striking today. He's -10. He's on the right side of tee times. Ryan Gerard gained over 3 strokes ball striking today. He's on the right side of tee times. Davis Thompson gained over 3 strokes ball striking and is also an AM wave player. That's why those guys are getting a little bit more attention. So my advice, actually, with the ball striking stats would be to go a little bit further down the board, not even that far, to like maybe even your Hidekis here, maybe even who's also going to be AM wave, by the way. Scroll down a little bit further, try and find some other AM wave guys that are going off, like Keith Mitchell also had a lot of room for regression with the putter. So that's another thing we'll talk about here in a second. But his ball striking, just under 2 shots gained today. Like, you don't have to be taking the guys that are the cream of the crop that are going to be getting all that kind of attention, especially when the weather edge is even further inflating their ownership. So, like, you're going to see me playing guys like Keith in my lineups because of that, right? Rather than some of those other chalky players up top. And you can continue this kind of trend further down the board. Like, I would love to play a Minwoo. I'd love to play Kurt Kitayama, but they're going to be in the PM wave tomorrow, so maybe not so much. But in Emiliano Grillo, kind of like Keith Mitchell, he had a decent ball striking day, over a stroke gained in those 2 categories, but he lost almost 2 strokes on the greens today. So he could be a short game regression candidate, which is somebody that, should be a little bit better in the short game categories tomorrow. We're going to talk a little bit more detail on that in about 30 seconds. But like, these guys further down the board are the ones that you're going to see in a lot of my lineups for tomorrow. And I'm still building my player pool right now, but it's a lot of those sort of guys that I've already marked down as a yes, rather than your pot guiders and whatnot that are probably due to come back down to earth a bit. Now, if I'm going to play somebody like a Thompson, right, he had elite tier course history, right? Like, you're going to use somebody that's chalky, maybe have more than just the shots gained metrics to get you onto those sort of plays. Like a Ryan Gerard, for example, he's not going to be as chalky as a Thompson, and he's super cheap, especially compared to where he should be. Like, he's a 9K range player with how he's been playing this year. Yet he's only in the top end of the 7K range for round 2 showdown. Like, there are a few players that I am breaking that rule with. I'm still playing on that side. Because it's not who you play, right? It's how you play them. I can still get different around those players and all the lineups that I'm using, but you want to be careful about it as well. And then the other aspect we look at with the shots gained metrics would be the short game, which if you gained a whole bunch of strokes around the green and putting, that is going to be difficult to pull off in back-to-back days. So, for example, Andrew Putnam gained over 6 strokes in the short game categories, and Michael Thorbjornsen gained over 5.5 strokes between the short game categories. Really, anyone that you see in the dark green, like over 2-3 strokes on the greens, over 2 to 3 strokes around the green as well. It's harder to gain that many, but even over 1.5 strokes around the green is going to be really tough to repeat. So, for example, if you're somebody like Thorbjornsen that gained those 5.5 strokes short game and then lost 1.5 strokes ball striking, then, I'm going to have a really hard time wanting to play that player when he's T7, he's chalk, he's going to be a lot higher owned than he otherwise would be because he's starting in the top 10. Like, in my opinion, that's a prime fade candidate. So, some of these guys up here, especially the ones that gained in both categories and struggled with the ball striking, are spots that I'm automatically crossing off. But on the flip side of things, the guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes in these short game categories, but were decent with the ball striking, could be a look for a bounce back. So, for example, Keith Mitchell, that's where he shows up. Seamus Power also has pretty decent course history, so like maybe you could look to him for a bounce back. Really tough round, though. I mean, he's T142 at this point. Cam Davis, you can say the same thing about, good course history, and the short game is what let him down today. You want to find AM wave players if you can, and unfortunately, guys like Cam Davis are on the wrong side of tee times. But if you do enough digging, you can find some short game regression candidates to add into the mix. And around the green, all of that applies as well. So obviously Cam Davis lost a whole bunch of strokes across both of those 2 categories. But you also want to make sure that their ball striking stats were half decent. You don't want to just take a look at the guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes in these categories and automatically think that they're going to play well the next day. It's more so like a Kurt Kitayama. He gained over a stroke ball striking in round number 1, but lost over 2 strokes in the short game categories. Like, he would be a really good bounce back candidate. Unfortunately, also on the wrong side of tee time. So when I was going through my research before the live stream, I was finding that with a lot of players, a lot of the guys with the kind of stat profile that I was looking for were on the wrong side of things, which is it's annoying as heck. If the weather changes and ends up being a little bit flatter, I'm going to have a lot of players, a lot of candidates to add to the player pool and round it out a little bit more. But I am trying to target the AM side of things. So when you're going through the shots gained metrics, you want to keep that in mind as well. And now that we've given it some time, I'll see if there's any player pool deep dives we need to do in chat. But on top of the shots gained metrics, I'm looking for high upside players. So if you haven't been here before, by high upside, I mean high birdie percentage players. Birdie or better percentage is directly correlated to DraftKings projection because that's where the vast majority of your showdown points come from. There's no placement points in play. The bogey penalty really isn't that big on Showdown. When you make a birdie, it more than outweighs any sort of bogeys that you're going to be posting. So the thing we want to optimize on a Showdown slate is oftentimes how many birdies that we have in that lineup. And looking at the guys that make the most birdies on the PGA Tour is, I think, a very reasonable thing to do. So you can obviously do that to try and find some plays. We talked ball striking, we talked short game regression, and then on top of that, course history as well. I mentioned that with Seamus Power, I mentioned that with guys like Cam Davis. If you can marry up some good course history and on the right side of tee times and low ownership, then those could be leverage spots to use in large field GPPs. And with my course history players and my high upside players, I oftentimes make those leverage plays guys that aren't garnering all that much ownership, because if I'm going to get onto a play with the shots gain metrics, that usually means they played pretty well the day before. There can be exceptions to that where like maybe they lost like 5 strokes between the short game categories. But for the most part, those are guys that are going to be a little bit higher owned than I'm playing, the ball striking and the short game players, just because of the nature of the shots gain metrics and using them to get onto players. But when I'm using the high upside and course history players, those are where I'm finding a lot of my diamonds in the rough. So I know we talk about the shots gain metrics here quite a bit. We use it to evaluate players and maybe how they're trending heading into the next day, but your process should be a little bit more well-rounded than that. So that's why I always throw out those ideas when it comes to players, because it is something that I use for myself. And on the SHIPIT Nation Stone, right, that's obviously unique to my process and what I post for my Patreon page, but the SHIPIT Nation Stone gives you a lot of data to work on that kind of stuff as well. I mean, Round 2 Historical is the absolute nuts when you're trying to find guys that play well on Fridays. You can use the approach and putting series to do a lot of the shots gained stuff for you, kind of like their version of going through those stats. There's a lot of different stuff you can use to get to players outside of how they just played today. And especially for Round 2 Showdown, when we get to Round 4 and we kind of have an idea of how guys are playing and we have placement points, it's maybe not so much the case. But after just 18 holes, I'll remind you, only 18 holes we've played for everyone in the field. We don't know that much. It's like the first quarter of an NFL Showdown slate. You can have a defensive touchdown that has them as the optimal captain play through the first 15 minutes. And then by the end of the game, it's like a 56-42 game, and you didn't want any defenses in that lineup. I mean, it's the same thing in PGA DFS. We don't want to overreact to what we saw just from today, which is why it is so important to have things on top of the shots gained metrics to round out your process as well. So don't be shy about that. I always like to spitball ideas too for things to add on top of that. I mean, you can look for bent POA putters. That's the surface of the week. You want to find guys that can have a spike putting day. I think trying to find guys that gain a whole bunch of strokes on that surface could be a good way to go about it. And then you could look at approach stats too. You could try and find guys that are good with the wedges. There's a huge correlation between wedge play and success around this golf course. There are an infinite amount of things that you could use to get onto players, but just have that process. That is the biggest key when it comes to playing PGA DFS, is not just picking names out of a hat. Having a rhyme or reason for getting to all the players in your pool is not only going to make you a better player, it's going to make you cut out a lot of shitty plays out of your exposure. Right? Because like there are times where like maybe you just click somebody for the heck of it, but if you're more intentional about it, you'll realize that sort of mistake and you go, you know what? There are better options around them that I can actually get value into my lineup by getting to one of those players. Maybe it's ownership leverage that you're getting to. Maybe it's, a course history. Maybe it's a high upside player that you're getting to instead of just pulling a name out of a hat. That is just so much better. And not only that, you can learn from that process too. And I'd say maybe that's the most important part about it, is if you have a process, you can refine said process, right? If you're just hoping to get lucky on a Showdown slate, then you have nothing to build on, right? You have no baseline to try and add on top of, to try and refine as you go forward. That's why it's so important to have that kind of idea in the back of your head. So that's it for the strategy section. Let's go through any player deep dives now. And then we're going to put a lineup or two together to put all of it together. So is Matty Fitz going to be chalky? So let me look at his ownership, at least on my projections. And they're not finalized, but I don't think he's going to be like quote unquote chalk. But I do have him in the mid-teens of ownership. So I would say that he's getting close to chalk. I have him a little bit lower owned than somebody like a Davis Thompson. But after his strong start, after the fact that he's come into this field with some of the best form that we've seen for the last year, you're going to see some people playing Matty Fitz, but I wouldn't call him chalk. So David Skins, not a name I expected to deep dive, but I know you played him this week, Nick, and you looked like a genius through the first 30 minutes or so. And he lost a whole bunch on approach. He did gain in the other 3 stat categories. Approach play is the most important category. So that is a pretty big red flag, but a 4 out of 10 stat profile, I'd say. like you have to give him credit for shooting a -3 round, having a slightly above average day. But the one category that means the most was unfortunately the one that really held him back. So, 4 out of 10 stat profile, though, isn't that terrible for a 6K range player. I hope he pays off for you. And he said, what's my cutoff for tee times? I would just say AM wave in general, because to go back to the weather in general in the morning looks a lot better than the afternoon. So I'm not somebody that ever really uses cutoffs anyways. That's just not my thing. And I'm not doing it in my process. As of right now, I'm just favoring the morning side of things, because like even if you are the first tee time, the winds are going to kick up a little bit, right? And I'll stress a little bit. It's only like 3 miles an hour difference, about 9 to 10. But the big difference isn't till about 1 p.m. So not really a cutoff time. And it's partially also because it's round 2 showdown. It's not like we have a continuous stream of tee times, right? It's just like the first versus the second half of tee times. And then there's like 3-4 hours in between. Kind of changes that up. And then he said, what are the current chances of thunderstorms postponing play? So you don't see it on the HRRR, but yeah, some of the other models here are calling for that being a possibility. I can't give you an exact percentage chance because I'm not a meteorologist. It's certainly not 0, and it's certainly not 100%. So I would say to look at some of the local forecasts. Maybe they can give you that percentage chance, but yeah, that's not my expertise, to say the least. I'm not going to pretend to be a meteorologist. I was right about Hostler. Dude hits it all over the place. Yeah, that's kind of his thing, man. He's a volatile player. If he happens to hit fairways, he can have a super low round. If he doesn't, he's going to make some bogeys. And today it was a good mix of both. Deep dive on Joe Highsmith, you're going to need an or he could performance. Let's take a look. I think you have a better chance with Highsmith than most players to have that kind of bounce back, considering that he's a higher pedigree player than most. And this stat profile, it's a 4 out of 10. It's, lower than average, I should say, because he did lose in 3 of the 4 categories. But ball striking wise, it wasn't terrible. I mean, he lost like 0.2 strokes to the field between his off the tee and on approach play. Short game was really where he lost most of the strokes today. In fact, almost 2 strokes lost between around the green and the putting. The or he could is going to be strong with players like Highsmith that are tour winners, that are, better players than the guys that are priced around him. And this stat profile, it doesn't scream bounce back, right? It's not like he gained 3 strokes approach and then lost 3 strokes putting, but it's a somewhat positive, a somewhat optimistic stat profile. So 4 out of 10 with upside, we would say. How about a nap bounce back in the AM? I certainly think that's a possibility. Shots gained wise, though, it's what I like to default in terms of how they're trending. And he lost about 3 strokes putting. You know what? I don't think I had him down as a yes quite yet, but there's a going to change in my player pool right as we speak, because those 3 shots gained lost putting is probably not going to happen all that often. And in my projections, still raw, still have to be refined after getting the last bit of play finished up. But I've got him at sub 5%. So he was about 10% owned in some GPPs this week. Actually, not as lowly owned as what I thought he'd be. But for showdown purposes now, after having some struggles, he'll probably be a lot lower owned. So I think a bounce back could be in store there. How was Dunlap's ball striking? The last time I checked, he was number 1 in the field in shots gained approach. So fantastic, Nick. But let's see if it held up. So he ended up number 4 in shots gained approach, gaining 3.67 shots gained in the category. Off the tee, he had a couple bad tee shots, one of which only went like 200 yards. So he's got to clean that up still. Still kind of hitting the ball all over the place. But this is an unbelievably positive stat profile. I mean, off the tee wasn't that bad, other than the fact that it's the devil's number. That's not necessarily a good omen. Golly. Any other number, bro. What are you doing, Nick? But almost 4 shots gained on approach is fantastic. And then you can see in the short game categories, right? He lost almost 4 strokes. He lost almost 3 with the putter. He's normally one of the best short game players we have on tour. This is just, it's the best stat profile that we've seen for quite some time. But golly, Nick. You couldn't have had any other number there. That's just a bad omen. Not a good sign, I guess, huh? Rami looks to check boxes, but no idea who he is. He's been around for a while. He's a well below average player. And I mean that as respectfully as possible. But you're right about the boxes being checked. Gaining off the tee, gaining on approach, losing about 2 strokes short game. And let me check on the tee time. I'm assuming that he's also AM wave based on your comment. And he is on the AM side of things. I mean, as a GPP flyer, he's usable, but we've got to remind ourselves too that it is Chad Ramey. There's a reason why you don't even know who he is. And it's not like he's a complete random. He's had his tour card, I think, for 3 years now. And he showed up the Players. He was in contention through 2 rounds there. He's had 1 win, I believe, on tour, believe it or not. It's crazy, right? It was an alternate field event, I believe, that he ended up winning like 2 or 3 years ago. But he's at least usable. Like, I'd rather have him than a really chalky Chris Ventura who's going off in the PM wave, who's $100 more expensive and probably going to be 3 or 4 times higher owned. So yeah, I'm not against the Chad Ramey play. He said, "You're late, fellas. Can somebody let me know what the weather edge is?" It's a AM wave, I would say. Brio, week-long donkey chalk must play. Yeah, I'm playing them. Stat-wise, I mean, this is just too beautiful to pass up. And like you said, the donkey chalk always ends up getting there. So it's definitely a player that I'll be using in the AM side. What's going on, Ross? Welcome on in, buddy. He said the pot getter's off to a good smoking start. I see what you did there, and cheers to that. Let's see if we can keep it going. You're in second place in the 300K Drive the Green. It's a great spot to be, dude. And hey, I know you just joined the Patreon page, so it looks like it's working out for you in your first couple weeks there. So cheers, and let's hope we hopefully can keep it going. Morikawa was terrible putting today. He is on the wrong side of tee time, so I'm not going to end up using him, at least as of now. Weather could change, of course, but you can see he lost 4.6 strokes with the putting. Yeah, you're not kidding, man. He was dreadful on the greens. Another way to put it. Hey, Luke, are you crazy to go 100% Cam Davis, you ask, and 20 maxes, and do I ever lock somebody? I do lock players occasionally. It's usually not like a Cam Davis, though. Like, if I'm going to lock somebody on Showdown at a 20 max, it's a stud like Scotty Scheffler normally that I'm considering that on. So are you crazy? A little bit, but a little bit of crazy isn't too bad. Like, you can be a little crazy in GPPs. That's just being aggressive. There's nothing wrong with that as long as you know what you're getting yourself into. If Cam Davis is an optimal play, I've got to say with this course history, like, there are much worse players to do that on. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense that you're looking for a course history guy. Unfortunately, though, he's on the wrong side of the tee time. So, I mean, if he was AM wave, I wouldn't call you crazy. I'd just call you a little crazy. But yeah, PM wave Cam Davis 100% could be a little bit too bullish. And you said, if not, like, what's the highest amount that I'd play someone? If you're talking about like a mid to a lower tier player, probably about 40%. And I'm a 150 max player, so I have to give that kind of perspective. I'm not a 20 max guy, so I'm not going to be as aggressive when I have a whole 150 lineups to work with, but normally 40% on somebody that's not like a Scotty. Scotty, I could play 100% and have played 100% a few times this year. Don't sleep on Kevin Velo. Yeah, he showed up a few times this year. I think that's a good shout. Do I feel like Colin's a good play regardless of his tee time, considering his course history and how awful he putted? There's an argument to be made for that, Yob, but I can't really answer that for you because, I mean, and you make very valid points, right? I would say that I don't really care about how good of a play somebody is when there are other AM guys up there that I like just as much. But if your process has Colin as just head and shoulders, the best play towards the top end of the board, and that's even including by the way, the way I do it is I adjust the AM wave guys, right? I give them all boost with projection, and I can project them kind of pretty evenly after doing so. If after you make those adjustments, he's still popping and you still want to use him, then for sure they could make an argument for that. But it all depends on how bullish you are on him and maybe how bearish, I guess, you are on some of the other players that are priced around him. So yeah, I don't think you're crazy for thinking that. Like, put it this way. If the weather ends up flatter than what it looks like right now, like let's say later tonight, the weather forecast changes, then yeah, like I could see myself using him. There's a few other guys towards the top that really fit that kind of stat profile too, that are on the PM side of things. Like Eric Van Rooyen is one that really stood out to me. I really want to play EVR, but he's a PM wave player tomorrow. There's a lot of guys that I will do that with, but as of now, I'm personally choosing not to. Early on, Dunlap was going for DFL, and then he was +2 right out of the gate. Yeah, early on he was, but he figured it out. That's for sure. He was hitting darts all day, so I'm cautiously optimistic about Nick. Ramey gets hot occasionally. That's for damn sure. He's like a first-round leader specialist. He's the kind of guy that pops for 18 holes. So I think if there's a place to use him, it's Showdown. And based on the ownership, based on how he's projecting for round 2, you know what? I've been convinced. He's getting added to the player pool. So it's I think you're spot on about that, Wayne. Like, if you play him, it's in this sort of format. And because the ownership's going to be non-existent, like I've made worse plays before. So he's getting added to the mix. Tell me about Vince Covillo. This is a name I've never seen before. I'm pretty sure he's like some old dude. Pretty sure he's like one of like almost like a senior tour level player at this point. Don't quote me on that, but I don't know much about him because I honestly think that he's like a 45, 50-year-old that used to play on tour that doesn't play anymore, but don't quote me on it. Birdie Fest all day. These 3-ball bets for hard. Everyone was pretty close. Yeah, it's Birdie Fest is crazy, man. You could shoot -5 in a 3-ball and not win. I mean, every other event, you shoot -4, -5, and you're pretty much locked in to win your 3-ball. It's a little bit of a different beast, that's for sure. Any love for Keith going off at 645, putted like garbage today? Absolutely. And it's not even just the putting. The ball striking was half decent too. You can see the 2.5 strokes that he gained on approach was, I believe, top 15 in the field. Yeah, I have quite a bit of love for Keith, that's for sure. Kevin Roy, what? That was my reaction too, man. I took a nap this afternoon and woke up with Potgieter in the lead. I was really happy to see that. And then I went, who the hell is tied with them? This Kevin Roy guy. Yeah, he pops randomly too. He's kind of like Chad Ramey, where you'll see him in a first-round leader. You'll see him as an optimal play on Showdown, but hardly ever does he get there over 4 rounds. So if you played Kevin Roy in Showdown today, congrats. That was the absolutely nutted play, but let's see what happens over the next 3 rounds. Do I feel like Minwoo is due for some regression? So stat-wise, I'll give you an idea. He is on the PM side, so that's not ideal. And he did gain over 4 strokes with the shots gained short game. Yeah, probably due for some short game regression. That's not to say that he's going to have a terrible round because he did gain over 1.5 strokes ball striking. If he gains 1.5 strokes ball striking and is just a neutral with the putter and around the green, I mean, that's a -4 round there. I mean, we'd be okay with that, right? -9, -4, -13 after 2 rounds. But yeah, it's going to be tough to shoot -9 again, especially when he was so short game dependent. Kevin Roy whooped Keith in your 3-ball bet. Yep. That's what I mean, man. Like, if you woke up this afternoon, you saw Kevin Roy at -10, you were like, what the heck? Deep dive Patrick Rogers, por favor. I got you, man. So good old P-Rod, or as loser POS, as my guy D-Gen would call him and Roy, right? The loser POSs. It just hacks me up every time I hear that term because it's true. They are losers at times. He lost a bunch on approach and then gained with the putter. Yeah, so the stat profile on P-Rod is like a 3 out of 10. Now, that's not a condemnation or anything. It's not me saying that he's dead, right, in round 2 Showdown, but the stats wouldn't be why you're playing him. So if you're going to use a Patrick Rogers, it would either be like course history. It might be that he's a high upside player that you'd want to be using him. Maybe he fits the putting stats that you're looking for, et cetera, et cetera. He'd be one of those like lower owned players that you could get to. And because he's T87 and he only shot -2, he is going to be low owned, right? So if you can find a rhyme and reason for getting to Patrick Rogers, like there's a time and place where you could get there, but at least as of now, nothing really comes to mind. Like he's not a high birdie percentage guy. At least to my knowledge, he's not a very good course history player either, but he is going to be low owned. I'll give him that. Kevin Roy, the Syracuse native. Okay. The more you know, I guess. Kevin Roy's had some very good starts lately for a 7K guy for sure. And I mean, he's sneaky in general. Earlier this year, he was top 25 a couple times. So he's been around a lot more than a Chad Ramey this year. Vince Whaley dive. Let's do it. Good old Vince Whaley, who I believe had a terrible start today and ended up at -4. So that's not the worst round, but it was all said and done. So yeah, he was +2 through his first 6. That was the rough start, but ended up rallying just like a Nick Dunlap did. So stat-wise, he gained in 3 of the 4 categories. He lost putting and gained in the 3 tee to greens. So I mean, this is a 5.5, a 6 out of 10 stat profile. A little bit better than average, but it's not like he gained a bunch of strokes in the ball striking category. It's just a little bit better than average. And yeah, so like he's probably about 5 out of 10 overall. Like it's just about as middle of the road of a play as you could possibly get. And the ownership on him is also going to be about middle of the road. So if you have a hot take on Whaley either way, let's say you love him, then play him because he's going to be about averagely owned. So you can get some leverage right there. But if you're like myself and you're kind of just like, whatever, right? Like he doesn't move the gears too much, then yeah, maybe you stay away. We'll have to see. Can I deep dive Goddard up? AM, you think? Yes, he is AM. And then you think potential bounce back spot? Let's look at it. I don't think I looked at his stat profile quite yet. So let's see. So lost on approach, kind of tough, and then lost with the putter too. So yeah, stat profile is a 2.5, 3 out of 10. It's a kind of rough scene. However, Goddard's form is solid heading into this event. So like you can make an argument that bounce back, the or he could is big on a Chris Gotterup. And I don't know his birdie or better percentage number off the top of my head, but I believe it was top 40 on the PGA Tour. If that's the case, then that's another reason that you could use him in lineup. So yeah, I'm a little bit more bullish on Gotterup just because he's playing better over the last month or so compared to like a Patrick Rogers. And let me actually just bring up the birdie or better percentage real quick. It'll only take a second, so we'll just do that. Let me share my screen so I can show you guys this. There it is. So scoring, birdie or better percentage. Now let's just compare the two because I know Rogers isn't like a terrible birdie maker. He's just not a lead in the category. So Rogers, number 103. Yeah, slightly better than average, but definitely not what we're hoping for. Let's go to Gotterup next, though. So Gotterup's number 59 on tour. So a little bit lower than I thought, but still very respectable in that category. Yeah, like if I'm going to use a bounce back guy, a lot of times it's these top like 75 birdie makers, top 50 birdie makers, if I can find them, that I'm using for those kind of spots. Not so much like the P-Rods. What's going on, Jay Hoove? Nice to get you in the live stream, even if it's a little bit late. Doesn't Michael Lasasso look like Travis Alexander? I don't know who that is, by the way. I'm terrible if that's like a reference to a movie or something like that. I hardly watch any movies. It's just not my thing. I'd rather watch sports. I'd rather play sports, hang out with my buddies instead. But yeah, I guess I can't give you any info there. I don't know what that's referencing. You know, you play some pretty nasty lineups. I know you do. Heck, you're probably playing Chad Ramey too, huh? It wouldn't surprise me. Let's look at Sibu. Okay. Sibu, by the way, good bounce back. His ball striking was on point, gaining almost 2 strokes approach. And then the short game was pretty pedestrian between the around the green and the putting. So, yeah, Sibu Kim, I believe he's in the AM side too. Let me double check that. Let's see. So, yeah, he's on the right side of tee times and will be in my player pool because of that. And I was a little concerned for main slate about the withdrawal and the injury last time out, but it looks like that was all squared away. And then you want to look at Ben Coles. Ooh, you're leaking all my favorite plays, man. But yeah, I love him. He lost 2.5 strokes putting. He gained over almost 3.5 strokes in the ball striking categories. Ben Coles is the quintessential play if you're looking at the stats. I mean, ball striking popper, due for some short game regression. He's also on the AM side of things. And yeah, one of the few guys that before the live stream I already had in my player pool. So sharp take, but let's keep that to ourselves, right? We don't want to steam them up too much. At least as of right now, Ross, I think we're looking at sub 2% ownership. And if we get sub 2% ownership, I'm going to be thrilled about playing him in like 7 to 10% of lineups because 7 to 10% right there is like 3, 4, 5x leverage. And yeah, he could be a pretty decent play. Do I play nasty lineups or are you supposed to? So yeah, kind of thrown off by your question, but I think I get the gist of what you're asking. Yeah, I play nasty lineups all the time, for sure, in large field GPPs, but I don't do that in my single entries. So, for example, like the big $5, $25, I embrace the nastiness. I embrace the variance of PGA DFS as much as possible, but like single entries, not so much. Like single entries, it's not like I'm playing tight or anything, but I wouldn't play like a Chad Ramey, for example, in a single entry. I wouldn't play a Nick Dunlop, who I used as a core play this week. I wouldn't use him in a single entry in that sort of format, but in like the big $5 or $25, for sure, I'd do that sort of thing. Just got your dude wipes delivered from Amazon. How's Higgs looking? Dude wipes, I gotta admit, genius marketing brand. All they did was took baby wipes and made them cool for guys. Stat wise though, 2.5, 3 out of 10. I mean, he lost ball striking and gained in the short game categories, but yeah, if you want to play him just because he's the legend and yeah, I couldn't blame you for that, I guess. Cole's another good or he could guy for sure. And you're saying the winning score could be minus 25 plus? No arguments from me, man. I think the hardest day is going to be tomorrow. And if it plays under par, like minus 1.5, minus 2, I think you're going to be right. And I would say minus 40, but with these wins that they've got coming, yeah, probably not right there. You're going to see some carnage tomorrow afternoon. It cracks me up to say that because, you know, carnage, quote unquote carnage at this course. It's all relative, I suppose. But like scoring average in the afternoon might only be like -1, which for this course is going to be a lot harder than normal. To round this off, though, let's go through some of the contests that are available and then build a lineup together to give you an idea of the thought process. But contest selection-wise, just make sure you're getting into sustainable contests. Ideally, we want something that's close to 10% to first place. Reason for that, of course, is that we want sustainable payout structures. We want to be entering contests that you don't have to win first place to have long-term ROI. So for example, like this drive the green is a 6 to first place, which for large field GPP isn't that bad, but we ideally want close to 10% to first if we can find like the ideal payout structure, which this long drive you can see is a little bit more than the 10% to first as well. So a little bit better than most GPPs though. That's I can't do that sort of, what is it, 6 to first place as well, I guess, in this sort of contest. So it wasn't that terrible mental math, I suppose. I thought it was going to be a lot harder. It took me about 0.1 seconds to calculate that. Let's go down to the $33 dog leg though. So this one is also a 6 to first place. Did they ruin all the single entries? Normally we have some that are 10% to first place, and now it looks like there's not any that are 10% to first. And yeah, even this one's 12% to first rather than its usual 10%. So they sized down the contest a little bit. They're a little bit smaller than what we usually see. And unfortunately, rather than making the payouts to first place a little bit smaller than what they normally are, they kept them the same and ruined the payout structure. So yeah, contest selection, sub-ideal to say the least for tomorrow, but I don't know. It's like if you enter the ones that are a 6th to first place, like a 7th and 8th to first place, it's not the worst thing. The ones that you want to avoid is when you start getting to a 4th or a 5th to first place, like you have in this sand trap here, because once you do so, I mean, look at the kind of drop off from first to second, right? It's almost 3 times lower going down from first to second. It's another almost like 2.5 times lower going from second to third. That's why you want to try and avoid these top heavy sort of contests. So unfortunately, DraftKings didn't give us the best kind of contest to enter, but it is what it is, I guess, right? Kind of, at least for me, I'm probably going to be max entering that 150 max. And then I usually enter single entries, but I might not this time around. If they're going to be a 6 to first place, just like the $5 GPP, then I'll probably just go with my 150 max exposure. But there are still some contests that could make sense. They're not all terrible, I suppose. But when you're actually putting together lineups, our main focus on DraftKings is going to be making sure that we have enough leverage in our lineups. And because it's round 2 showdown, just like round 3 showdown, there's not going to be placement points in play. We want to embrace as much chaos as we possibly can. So up top, while it might be a little bit tempting to want to play Ben Griffin, who's on the AM side and going to be chalky, like I slightly prefer getting to your Cam Youngs, maybe even your, I don't know, Siwoo Kims at $9,000. They're going to be a little bit lower owned. And you can still play like a Davis Thompson if you want to. I mentioned him being a little bit sneaky high owned. You can still make it work if you're not taking all the chalk at the top. But even with your last 3 players here, we still want to be thinking about that leverage, because if you can avoid taking chalk, it's almost always the best plan, the best idea for round 2 and 3 showdown. The chalk isn't nearly as valuable as what it is for main slate. And the reason for that is not only do we only have 18 holes so far, like we only have 18 holes worth of data to work with, but on top of that, when you have an 18-hole sample size, right, smaller sample sizes, this is the case with literally everything. It's not just golf. It's just a number theory. When you have smaller sample sizes, your variance increases. That is just how math works, is how numbers work. When you have larger sample sizes, like over 72 holes, as opposed to 18 holes like we have for Showdown, the variance tends to get kind of canceled out a bit, right? You have a bigger sample size, you're not going to see as much randomness in that set of data, which is why for main slate, like you might want to take some chalk, like 1 or 2 spots in your lineups. Showdown, you don't have to take any chalk if you don't want to. If you want to have pivots in 5, even all 6 spots in your lineup, then so be it. I'm okay with doing so, especially if you're playing a weather edge like we are for tomorrow. So let's go Chris Goddard up there. Let's throw in trying to make sure they're all on the right side of tee time. So like Kirky's not going to be super low owned, but he is an AM wave player. But with this sort of lineup, we don't have any mega chalk in here, maybe outside of the Davis Thompson. We've got like averagely owned Siwoo Kim, averagely owned Chris Goddard up. And then for our last mid in here, as long as we're not taking like the highest owned player possible at $7,500, you probably get away with that in the large field GPP. And I show you this lineup to show you that you don't have to like get super different about it, right? There's no one in this lineup that you're like, huh, that's like a terrible play. It like doesn't make sense why you'd want to get to that sort of guy. Which I think sometimes when people hear the word leverage, right, getting different to the field, they think they have to like go through hoops, do all this crazy stuff to try and get that leverage. When reality is, it's only taking a few guys that are like 10% and lower, and you've accomplished all that leverage that you're looking for. So, of course, DraftKings frowns upon you clicking all 6 players into a lineup, but pretty much no matter who you rounded that lineup off with, you'd be okay. I know Knapp is an AM wave guy, and I think he's the only guy at $7,500 that you could use on the right side of tee times. You used him at T130 to finish off that lineup, and you would for sure be fine when it comes to getting that kind of a leverage. So that's the idea in the large field GPPs, is just making sure that you're getting enough differentiation. And the things that you want to kind of avoid, right? If you would have started with like a Ben Griffin, maybe your second man in, you went Grazerman, who's probably going to be the highest owned player in that 9K range. If you went Griffin, Grazerman, then Thompson, then you had guys like Goddard and Kirk as your like fourth, fifth man in. This is where you might start to get into trouble. And I stress might, because even then you still might get away with it, frankly, entering this chalky of a lineup, especially when you have like a Goddard in there to kind of offset a lot of that chalk. But like if you rounded this lineup off with Kevin Roy, another piece of like mega chalk at $6,700, then that would be a lineup that would be negative EV and like the $5 or $25 GPP, because not only would you have a pretty high chance of duplicating yourself, which is just the absolute worst thing you can do for tanking your long-term ROI. But also you're going to be dealing with leverage issues, right? Even if your players hit in this sort of lineup, you're going to be sharing them with like 7 to 10% of the field in almost every single spot, if not closer to 20, 25, 30% like you have with your 9 and 10K players. So that would be the problem with that sort of lineup, which is why, right, if you're going to start with a super chalky start like this, you might have to leave some salary on the table, and you certainly want to avoid guys that are like -7 or better. Like even a Zach Johnson, you might not want to play because he'll be getting a little bit more steam. Like if you went to like a -1, a -2, leaving $200 on the table, you could make that chalky start work, but you have to do a lot more work further down the line to offset that chalk than if you started with a little bit more of a reasonable, less chalky core with your 8, 9, and 10K range. So that's how you have to balance the ownership. It's a balancing act across the board. If you play some chalk up top, right, you're going to need some differentiation down towards the bottom. But if you take more of a leverage start, right, maybe not all the super high-owned guys at the top end of the board, then maybe you can afford to take a little bit more chalk towards the bottom. So that's the lineup construction segment. That's what you need to know heading into tomorrow's slate. That's all we've got for the round 2 showdown stream. So best of luck with all the exposure that you guys are getting to. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already gone to that, and also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. That, of course, will include our content for rounds 3 and 4, which will be live on the YouTube channel at 7 p.m. Eastern time the next 2 nights, as well as all the prop and betting stuff that I do on my YouTube channel, going over the underdog and prize pick stuff, matchups on the sports books for rounds 2 through 4. We're going to have a live stream tonight on my YouTube at 9 p.m. Eastern time, going through all of that exposure for round 2 as well. So if you're on the sports books, if you're on the pick'em sites like underdog and prize picks, make sure to stop on by the GS Luke DFS YouTube channel later on tonight. Again, that's 9 p.m. Eastern time, going through all of the betting stuff that you need for tomorrow. And we do a massive deep dive of conditions over there, because betting on golf, betting on like birdies and strokes almost completely comes down to your read on the golf course. So we go through pin locations, we go through another weather deep dive, even more thorough, I would say, because we're trying to figure out exactly how the golf course is going to play. We give you an idea of how to attack all the different prop categories, all of that kind of stuff, which not only obviously helps with the betting side of things, but it can make you a better DFS player as well, because we deep dive players, what stat categories they excel in, and knowing the course conditions and how the course is going to play is also pretty advantageous as well. So make sure to stop on by for that if you guys are looking for that little bit of extra information. But best of luck, as I was saying before. I hope to see a lot of your names towards the top end of these GPPs. I will go over any last second questions that you've got for me down in the live chat. But that's it for round number 2. So let's see where we left off, and let's get this thing wrapped up, shall we? Yeah, I love myself some Carnage. So you're not going to be Oakmont level Carnage, but maybe a little bit with that win there. If the -4 is a projected cut, you're in trouble. It might even be -5, man. So let's hope for your sake that you get some spike rounds. Typically weird and difficult to peg performance-wise. That's for damn sure, Joseph. I'm glad that he turned it around. I was worried after his first few holes that my 25-30% of lineups with Hideki were dead, but he rallied like an absolute champ. Today was a day of rallies, I would say. Not just from Decky, but guys like Dunlop, Whaley as well. A lot of that happened. He said nothing great tomorrow contest-wise. Yeah, it's pretty trash, if I had to give my opinion. He said, thanks for all your help. You've been watching my videos for 3 and 4 months, and you always look forward to my videos. Hey, I appreciate that, Mike Ava. It's I appreciate the kind words, and yeah, we'll be keeping it going for a long time. So make sure to keep on stopping back for these live streams. Do I like Knapp to bounce back? I don't think he sets up that well stat-wise, but he could be in for some putting regression. So I'll be using him at low ownership. He said you were excited that Valimaki and he finished at -4. Then Roy Pott and all these other guys teed off. That's DFS for you, man. After round 1, you have to have the absolute nuts. But we'll see. Maybe your guy Valimaki will chase down those guys over the next 54 holes, because you got to remember it's like the first quarter of an NFL showdown slate. It's if you're overreacting to the first quarter's results, Normally, it's going to look a lot different by the time you get to the fourth quarter. So stay tuned on that one. And he said thoughts on Whaley. I gave them before, Kim, so you might want to scroll back and check out my full thoughts there. But that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck for tomorrow. And I see you guys for the prop and betting live stream a little bit later on tonight.